So Daniel, welcome to the show. Fantastic to have you on here. You and I have known each other for some time, and I think we've been talking about getting you on here for ages. And then just like our lunch dates, it never seems to happen. But here, maybe this will lead to a lunch date. Who knows?
Hope so.
So for everyone who's watching, tell me all about ASW or ASY, and whichever you're calling it these days, and sort of how you came into that business to give everyone some context.
Thanks for having me. So ASY, now referred to as ASW, we are a premium offshore staffing provider, which I think a lot of people kind of get confused with. What does that mean? And
they do.
Yeah, so I often get asked, is that when you sort of sponsor visas to come out here and work onshore? It's not that. It's kind of like outsourcing, but different.
Yep.
What we basically do is we build teams, dedicated teams for Australian businesses that happen to be located within our offices overseas.
Yep.
So we have a network of offices through Southeast Asia, and ultimately what we do is we find and manage HR, facilities management, payroll, IT for our clients.
So in essence, if you compare the two, and this is where I remember when we first met at Cub, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago, I was confused about the difference because remote working I really hadn't got involved with from a recruitment perspective back then. There was outsourced teams, and then there's your teams, right? So an outsourced team is essentially another company that has their own staff that you can pay for either day on day, hour on hour, whatever it is, right? Whereas what you provide is you have staff that you recruit that sit on your premises with your computers and your payroll, but they are employed by the end client. So they are their employee and you're managing them, is that right?
Kind of. They're legally employed by our business. Right. But the terminology is they're directly seconded into the client as a dedicated staff member. So, all very close to...
They don't work two different companies. They're that company's sort of resource permanently.
Exactly.
And they sort of fit into their culture and they report into them from a day-to-day basis. So what do they report in to you guys for? Is it just...
So I guess the way in which we describe the relationship is that we're managing the person. So the things like HR and payroll and obviously the facilities management and the IT and all those things that are associated with that, we're taking care of that and providing governance across those areas of the business. And ultimately the client's relationship is the delegation and management of the tasks, and obviously introducing and I guess embedding that team member into their own Australian work office culture. So it really is a partnership approach. Probably the easier way to describe it would be, if you think of outsourcing, it really is you're engaging with a third-party business on an SLA arrangement typically for their anonymous team to deliver work on an ad hoc or ongoing basis. Typically, the client doesn't know who that team is or who that person, that end specialist is.
And they wouldn't deal with the individual there, would they? They deal with
typically not
a team leader or something.
Yeah, and it might be usually worked out on a project basis, an hourly rate or what have you, with an outsource arrangement. Ultimately, with an offshore staffing arrangement, you're, as the client, as the onshore Australian business, you're part of the hiring process. So from interview through to offer, the client's actually hand selecting the team members to join their business the same way they would if they were hiring them here in Sydney or in Australia.
And they decide the salaries and so forth?
So ultimately, we help manage that through that with the client, so full transparency of passing through the salaries. But ultimately, and when it comes time for performance reviews, that's ultimately what you're, I guess, engaging with a service provider to help support the onshore client with. But yeah, definitely part of that salary process as well at the very beginning.
And it would save me, say if I'm going to set up in Vietnam, right? If I want to employ people myself, literally do it all myself, I'm going to have to incorporate a company. I'm going to have to engage an accountant, right? I'm going to have to do all those things and actually create a business to be able to legally pay people. This is a way of doing that without having to go through all that rigmarole. I literally go and find the people with you, and then you manage them for me, but they report to me and I control their tasks. So it's really getting the best of both, I guess. Is that probably the best way of looking at it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best, I guess, what are the benefits or the values of doing it? One of them really is that it gives the business the ability to be able to scale their resources and infrastructure. Their resources and their team without necessarily having to invest in more onshore.
Yep.
So they can basically leverage our facilities, our HR, our payroll, our talent, all of those services without necessarily having to add that here.
Yeah.
They ultimately get the baby without the pregnancy, I guess, is the ultimate way of trying to describe that. So I think that...
That's awesome. I've never heard you say that before.
So I think then if you've got something like, it helps businesses be able to scale quickly.
Yep.
From that sense, because you can actually get talent that perhaps you might not be able to attract locally. But at the same time, I think it gives businesses the ability to not necessarily worry about the running of their business so much, but more so the delegation and performance management.
Yeah.
Working in their business, not on it. So,
and are they permanent employees?
They are.
Of you?
Yes, correct.
And so from my perspective, if I had 5 people who I had hired through this method,
yeah.
They are, what does that look like? Are they on a notice period? So for example, if you think about an employee here, they will have a 4-week notice period. Is it a similar sort of thing? You have a notice period. It's exactly the same. So really, you're just trying to make it as simple and as replicable as it is here, but
exactly.
over there, right? But
exactly.
at a fraction of the cost, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, the cost benefits obviously are going to be a given. When you're looking at outsourcing and offshoring, I think saving dollars is going to be a given.
Yep.
I think ultimately now, it's funny, I think a lot of the interest that we're getting now isn't about so much cost saving, which is pleasing.
Yep.
It's actually about solving a problem, whether it's attrition locally, whether those high churn roles here that just don't seem to stick, whether it's about just actually finding the talent. I think a lot of clients who are reaching out to us now are at the point, particularly technology being as fast growing as it is,
yep.
They're reaching out to us not so much because, hey, we're trying to save money on this development team or what have you. It's because we've exhausted all opportunities where COVID has enabled us to kind of do business from anywhere. We just need great people as soon as possible.
Yep.
So I think that's where the sentiment is now from clients. So, but yeah, to your point, yeah, it does now give businesses the opportunity to be able to tap into that end resource, that talent, that team member, and ultimately just worry about delegation.
Yep. And look, that's obviously why you and I are talking quite a lot now, because we can't find the talent. COVID has stopped anyone coming into the country.
Yeah.
There's just simply not enough people here. So it's becoming, not just becoming a real solution, it's becoming an absolute solution. It's almost got to be part of everybody's solution, which is cool. So I think I think it's the timing for it now is amazing.
Absolutely. I think that there's a couple of factors that probably driving it. One is obviously the talent, as you mentioned, the talent shortage locally here. I think we're obviously we're now pre-pandemic unemployment levels. We're obviously going through an economic boom by way of growth.
Yep.
There just simply isn't enough people for us to be able to fill the roles. So now that's, I guess, forcing all of us to look more broadly. And I think we're probably a bit slow adopters here in some respect. It's been going on forever.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that I think maybe the recent pandemic's kind of playing a bit of catch up with us. We're kind of playing catch up with the rest of the world.
There was always a quality worry, right? And I think that probably comes from not your model, but the outsourcing model.
Absolutely,
which
yeah.
we all remember from, I don't know, what was it, the early 2000s, when everybody outsourced everything and it was a total disaster?
Absolutely. It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, for sure. And I think that there was, and I think that probably is a good point to my own initial concern. Initially, I thought the exact same thing. Outsourcing, you're going to lose control, have no ability to do quality assessments and understand how things are working. You're basically giving things over to someone else and literally set fire to it. I think that this gives businesses still the control they need and the ability to build out the process that they want within their business and still have visibility, understand who it is at the end that's actually performing the work. So that's... But you're right, yeah. There's a huge amount of factors that are driving the offshore discussion. I think that now that we've got technology really servicing its purpose, Zoom, Teams, all these different project management tools, I've got to be honest, I don't know how they did it 30 years ago.
Badly.
The US, yeah, exactly, really poorly. But now I think it's become quite seamless.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's go back to you a little bit. So you've been with the business 5 years, the business is 10 years old, right? And you've been in the business 5 years.
Yep.
So talk to me about maybe your journey a little bit and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. So I won't go too far back.
No, don't go too far back.
We've only got a short amount of time. So professional career, I'll start with that. So I was fortunate. I was drafted out of high school into the AFL.
Yep.
And which was amazing.
You're the first guest who's been taller than me, actually.
Right. You keep handpicking the shorter
Absolutely,
people.
always, yeah.
Yeah, so it was obviously incredible to be, I was 17 at the time, and to know that you've got work the next 3 years or 4 years sorted was a huge relief, but to also be drafted and do the dream job that every kid wants to do is play their professional sport of choice was incredible. Unfortunately, I had a couple of knee reconstructions over a short period of time.
Yep.
That dream came tumbling down quite quickly, and kind of left that industry probably realising a few things. And one is obviously things are never forever, and I did have a bit of a chip on my shoulder as well at the time.
It would have been an incredibly difficult time.
Oh, it was heartbreaking, and I think ultimately, and I guess when you look back now that I've probably got a bit more business acumen than I did as a 20-year-old kid, I look back and from an investment point of view, I can see their decisions. You know, they've got a young kid who's 3 years into his professional career and he's managed to only put together a couple of games by way of injury. So I certainly look at it now and I think that, probably wasn't a good investment on their behalf. Yep. But at the same time, it was crushing to
Was that a club you'd supported, or was it a different club? Because it's always interesting.
It was a different club.
Okay, well, that's probably one good thing, because that would have been even more heartbreaking.
So it was the AFL. It was the Melbourne Demons. So they were the year before they'd made the grand final. So that was awesome. I'm thinking, great. There's going to be flags. There's going to be all this kind of fun ahead. And anyone who's a Demon supporter knows that definitely wasn't the case. So. So I had an awesome time and I learned a lot. And being involved in a professional environment, I think the skills and attributes that you pull out of being in that environment, that high performance elite environment, is awesome. Mm-hmm. I then, with no job and no real career plan after sport, because that was going to be my 10-year career, I got into property and into real estate, which was awesome. I loved it. It taught me a lot about prospecting, negotiations, marketing.
Hard industry to break into.
Tough industry, and as a 21-year-old kid with a chip on his shoulder thinking that, how hard could it be? It was a real learning curve, and I really enjoyed it and was quite lucky that we did quite well. Was in a good office, had a good team, sort of training and supporting me. And then, as you do at 23, you start your own business.
Of course.
Because you already know everything.
You do, yeah. And it's the right time.
It's the right time. and what better thing to do than start your own retail business, of course, because you've been working in retail your whole life. So I had no idea about retail, hadn't run a business before on my own, and I joined up and started a business in retail.
It's interesting that you did that. I mean, that's a you've had a massive crushing blow. You've gone into an incredibly difficult industry, and then you've gone, you know what? I think the next logical step is to start a business in something I've got no idea about. I mean, just the mindset and the thinking is quite fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's when you start. I started getting grey hair when I was about 26. So
that's when I started shaving as soon as it went grey.
So I think, I think ignorance is a real asset at that age.
I think you're right.
Going in with blind faith, I think, is one of the real advantages of being young.
That's why I love the startup space. Blind faith.
Yeah, exactly.
Blind optimism.
And looking purely from the point of this is going to win, and not even considering the fact that it may not. So I started.
What kind of retail?
So we had a menswear business, and I'd wore suits, so I knew all I needed to know about clothing.
Once you're a real estate agent, you know everything to do.
Well, yeah. So we started a business in menswear. It was a bit different. It was a niche model where we travelled into offices and fitted guys up and what have you.
So it's sort of semi-tailored.
Yeah. So we did made to measure and we did off the peg, and we look really fortunate. It was awesome. One of the things that we were good at was prospecting and closing deals, and that probably came on the back of what I'd learnt within the property space. Did you do this
with another real estate guy?
No. So his background was finance. Okay. Mine was property. We then
he's in finance. He wore suits too. So
yeah, exactly. So we both obviously knew what we needed to know. So we scaled to about 30 staff, 3 states.
That's incredible.
And got a multi-million-dollar revenue, which was great in turnover. But after about 10 years, I'd had enough. I was definitely burning the candle at both ends, and the partnership was probably starting to go a bit south as well. So we decided to part ways, and from there I started another business, in equipment, as you do.
Another logical step.
Why not? And that was really fun. So with some childhood friends, we built that up. I sold out as a build up and sell off sort of project. I sold that before my wife killed me because we had a baby on the way and I probably have a few too many fingers in too many pies.
Yep.
And it was at that point where my brother-in-law invited me to come over, which is leading into the ASW conversation. He said, why don't you come overseas and check out what we've set up with these offices and how we're supporting Australian businesses back. And I must admit, at the time, I'd thought that he was just focusing purely in the insurance space. Mm-hmm. I didn't really understand that he was broadening the service offering. So I was sceptical, like a lot of businesses, a lot of people, about outsourcing.
Yep.
Still, my stigma was it was outsourcing. I'm not sure how this is going to work and how I could help him because he was trying to grow the front end of the business.
Yep.
So I went overseas and saw the offices in Ho Chi Minh, and so we had an office in Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Mm-hmm.
Is that still where you are now? So
Yep. Those three, and we're looking to expand again into, hopefully, when this whole COVID thing washes over in the next sort of 12 to 24 months again, into another country. And after seeing the facilities for one, but then to look at the quality of the talent that was working, my perception was this is going to be the lowest manual tasks, very poor level of quality. And instead I walked in where qualified accounting, senior developers, level 3 service desk type guys, really accomplished, degree qualified staff, working for a whole range of quality businesses. And I was blown away, it really was. And but at the same time, I was kicking myself, thinking of the 10 years of the late nights, doing IT, finance, marketing, all those things, trying to wear many hats. Yes. I'd realised that I'd missed a big opportunity and perhaps that my perception wasn't necessarily accurate. I hadn't researched it the way I probably thought I should. I think that in the industry that we work in, you've got, like a lot of industries, there's so many different variables. You've got the outsourcing versus offshoring, you've got freelancers, you've got contract workers, you've got part-time, you've got recruitment guys that just hire people and they work from home. There's so many different, solutions out there, and some of them are the right fit for the right client, and sometimes ours is not the right fit for that client. So fast forward, now 5 years in ASW, I came back. We had a beer and discussed the opportunity, and I immediately said, I think this is something that businesses will be really interested in, knowing that they can be part of building their own dedicated team, knowing that there's full transparency, knowing that there's governance and security. Yep. So here we are. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a great ride.
That's a hell of a story all the way through, isn't it? Jeez. Whew.
Sorry about that. Have we finished? Is the time over?
We're way gone over here. They stopped filming 10 minutes ago. So, just out of interest, is the chip gone?
It's smaller. Yeah. I think anyone who knows me, knows that I like to think that anyone can do anything, so...
I think you're a good model of that, so yeah.
Yeah, well, whether it's done well or not is probably the other question. But I come from a background where, single mother, two young boys, myself and my brother, and I think that both of us, the boys, have really taken an approach that if you want to change something. So we've now been quite lucky that we're enjoying what we do and having a good time while we do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I've got to. This leads perfectly into my next question.
Okay.
Which is the question about belief.
Yep.
So we asked everyone this, and the variance of answer is amazing, and that's probably why it's still my favourite question. And it unfortunately wasn't my question. Okay. Someone else gave it to me. I'm not going to tell you who because you know who they are. But I was like, that's such a good question. I'm going to use that. Is there some sort of belief that you've had at some point in your life?
Yep.
And a belief is such a fundamental core thing that that is a product of essentially your upbringing usually.
Yeah.
That has changed through this insane journey you've been through. And what was it? And what was it that made it change?
So I think that from a belief system point of view, given that we'd grown up what is basically on the poverty line as kids,
yep.
I think that looking at successful people, at some point in time, my belief was that they'd taken a risk somewhere in their journey. And
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and some of those risks are enormous, and some of those risks perhaps weren't. And they were quite calculated. But I think ultimately they've taken a risk in order to create either their business or their empire, or whatever it is that they've done. So I'm a big believer that if you want to do something that's extraordinary, you have to do something that's not necessarily the ordinary, what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer that risk ultimately is where success will lie. As far as changing my beliefs and along the journey, I'm probably a little bit old-fashioned that hard work still is the ultimate.
I don't think that's old-fashioned. I've had really young entrepreneurs come in here knowing that that's the route they've got to go.
Yeah, and I think that's which is great, because I think often when you put something on social, it's work smarter and we do it this way. I still ultimately think that
you need to do both.
Exactly.
Smart and hard.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately the smarter side of things doesn't come until later, when you figure out all the mistakes. And I've certainly made every mistake over the time. My belief system probably changed on the back of having run my own small business and probably being influenced by other people's feedback about, for example, outsourcing is a great one, without necessarily throwing myself into it further. But most definitely, the biggest thing I think is that if you want to do something really, really exceptional, then take the risk for sure.
That's good. I like that. And no one's ever brought that up before.
Really?
John, what are we, episode 38, 37 or something? I can't believe no one's ever brought that up.
It'll catch on.
Every episode from now on, yeah. Once they've heard it, everyone's just going to say the same. All right, so question that everybody that listens to the show always wants is podcast or book. That can be either. It doesn't have to be one you're listening to now. It can be something that you just found was amazing, that you read 10 years ago, or it could be something you've just discovered. And it doesn't have to be business related either, because some people don't listen to business related stuff at all. Give us what you got.
Book. I'm in Limitless at the moment, which is Jim Quick. Yeah, so I think that the reason I threw myself into that, I've never been a really good reader, as you know, and they've taken me a long time to get through. So his whole thing is obviously about speed reading and, cheat sheets to learning and what have you. So, and the way he describes it's a bit like the genie granting, when you have 3 wishes, you want unlimited wishes, So that I think's been a really good book for me of late. And there's a few others there that from Tim Ferriss and what have you that I've thrown myself into. That
Tribe of Mentors is, what I like about that book is, because I'm not particularly, as you know, I'm dyslexic, so I don't like to read extensively. It's just lots of little short stories, right? And that's
Tool of Titans.
About it. Yeah,
it's great. So, and I'm a bit the same. It's just tidbits of, just give me the practical stuff I can just throw myself to.
Don't waffle on about stuff and get too complicated.
Yeah, and I'm the same with mild dyslexia, so, I just want to get to it, and things take me. I read the same page 3 times in order for it to sink in.
You need to turn them,
Probably won't take me 3 times as long, right? So, podcast-wise, look, I listen to a whole bunch of different stuff, podcast-wise.
Is there one that you keep coming back to?
Scaling up. I mean, I obviously really enjoy listening to other fast growth businesses. I'll give a mate of mine a plug. So I've got a mate of mine, Nick Bell. He's got a podcast called Listening. So I listen to a bit of his stuff every now and again. He's getting some really good guests coming on, doing, anything and everyone really, but world global type businesses. So that's been a good one of late.
Yeah.
But ultimately, anything that's not the radio, in the car, just podcast goes on. So I'm listening to a heap of different stuff.
Yeah, the car's the place to do it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, and we'll split it into 2, right?
Okay.
So I don't know whether you're hiring yourselves at the moment or not, but let's talk about, firstly, if I'm a business that's considering offshore, whether I'm looking at outsourcing or your model, and whether I know the difference or not.
Yep.
Why should I come and talk to you?
So I think for one of the important factors, if someone is considering looking at offshore staff, it's important for them to understand the differences in the models, for one. And I think we've become pretty efficient at describing what we do versus others. And I think that then gives business partnerships a very clear understanding of what to expect when expecting. While they reach out to us, I think they can walk away with a pretty clear understanding as to what the offering is, with assurance that they're going to. One of the negatives with outsourcing is often retention and attrition. So often they find themselves rehiring, retraining. thankfully, we've got a 96% retention rate. So
96?
Staff, the industry average is 40.
96?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So when you do things like providing international company trips and all these things that we provide all of our staff, we've realised that you've got to invest in the people, in the employees. So I think our ideal clients are clients that obviously have a really high importance on HR and not only talent sourcing, but then how do you keep great people as well? Once you've got them, how do you keep them? So I think for businesses who are interested in it and want to understand how it works and what can be delivered, I think we've become relatively efficient at describing how we can support them.
You used the word transparency a lot earlier, I guess. So is that something that you feel you're very good at being? Because there is a sort of mystique around it, right?
I think so. I think that on the back of Joe, who's the co-founder of the business, that's always been his approach. He's put people first and be really transparent. And I think when you go into that relationship or that approach in business, there's never any surprises. Yeah. You can always be completely honest all the time in conversations. So it's held us in good stead, for 10 years. Our client retention rate is, as equally as high as our staff retention. So, for example, we had a lunch this week with a 9-year client. It's been with for 9 years. And
what do you do for 10?
Well, we've got a 10-year anniversary coming up.
Of course you do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how we do it, obviously amidst COVID, but...
Don't go to Melbourne over the sea.
No, I won't be going down there. So I think, why would they come to us? I think it would be incredibly insightful for them to understand what actually could be delivered and how perhaps we could solve some of their problems, for sure.
Yeah, okay. And then and I'm sure you will be growing here as well as obviously overseas, and maybe some people overseas are watching it as well.
Yeah, we are growing up here as well.
Well, there we go. So why should we come? Why should someone come and work for you?
I think... And I've obviously been watching a few of your shows. I think culture is something that a lot of people talk about, but
everyone talks about it.
Yeah, and I feel that one of the things, particularly in the industry that we work in, it's something that we've really tried to champion. And I'll give an example on this. Is that so? For example, when the pandemic hit, in March last year, the initial concern from a lot of businesses was how do we cost cut in order to get us through this difficult time. The sentiment from Joe and the board was, well, we're going to guarantee everyone their job. It's all 1,200 staff, no one's losing their job.
1,200 now.
1,200 staff, so no one's going to lose their job. So when we talk about culture and putting people first over profit or anything like that.
Of a very unknown period of time, that's a big statement.
It was huge. Now, I think when we talk about, not putting things on walls and coffee cups, but actually, living and breathing, the resounding feedback from staff was enormous.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's hard to articulate.
Particularly when in those countries where you knew COVID was going to be worse.
Exactly. And I think we've onshore, being part of a steering team of executives and what have you, that where we are growing, being part of that culture, I think is awesome. We're diversifying by way of providing new solutions, so that's exciting. We've created a digital agency. We've created a talent search, executive search overseas. It's evolving. Yeah, so it's an exciting place to be. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Good answers.
Thank you.
What a pleasure it has been having you on. And I learned some stuff about you, even though I've known you all these years, which is awesome. And thank you so much for coming on. And look, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, I'm assuming LinkedIn or the ASW or AS White website or one of those ways is the best way.
Yeah, easy to find.
And look, I know we've got some things planned together with our two businesses, which is exciting. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. And
definitely.
I look forward to seeing what happens.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it, mate.